Welcome to Philanthropy Impact's Walk in My Shoes member series, our carefully curated resource designed to help support you as you support clients to navigate the philanthropy and impact investment space. My name is Zofia Sahanik and I'm the Director of Membership and Development here at Philanthropy Impact and the person to talk to if you'd like to know more about our training programme and how to make the most of your membership. I will share my email in the chat or at the end of the session for those watching the recording. Today, we'll be discussing and highlighting how philanthropists and impact investors can fund solutions to the global refugee crisis with a focus on Afghanistan. Our chair for this session is our very own CEO, John Pepin, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome our three panellists, Kate Markey, who's the CEO of London Community Foundation, Stephanie Berger from Prism, the Gift Fund, and Astrid van Genderen Stort. Apologies if I've done that a disservice, Chief of Emergencies and Marketing at UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. As we keep these discussions strictly to 30 minutes, they do go very quickly, but we encourage audience interaction. So please use the chat to introduce yourselves, have your say, and pose any questions you have to our panel. Please make sure to select everyone when posting in the chat so that we can all see. Thank you all for joining us today and to the panel for your time and your insight. I'll now hand over to John to make a start. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone and welcome to the panel. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because I can see I can learn a lot about an area that I don't know a lot about. Maybe we could start off with each one of you talking about who you are and what your interest is in this topic. So Astrid, would you start off, please?
Yes, my name is Astrid van Genderen Stort. Very well said. Thank you so much. I know it's a difficult name. And so I'm the head of emergencies and marketing within UNHCR. For me, this is a particularly important session because, of course, refugees are people that are very close to my heart, not only refugees, but forcibly displaced. UNHCR takes care of 82 million forcibly displaced people around the world. And that's an enormous responsibility. We have 17,000 staff working everywhere, and I've worked 26 years, mostly in the field and mostly in emergencies. And of course, it's very, very important that we have the support of many of you to be able to do what we do best around the world. It's an impossible problem. It needs to be, of course, tackled also in its root causes. But refugees and forcibly displaced are people who do not choose to flee and arrive somewhere and deserve the support that they can get, and we can provide it to them. But they deserve to be treated, of course, in dignity and safety, and be given the resilience and the support that they can be resilient with around the world. So that's why I'm very interested to be here today. Of course, there's a lot to talk about. With 39 million emergencies, 39 emergencies around the world at this moment in time, and 15 very active ones. And one of particular importance is, of course, the Afghanistan crisis right now.
Thank you, Astrid. And Kate.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. So just to give you a bit of an oversight, I guess the why, the what and the how. So London Community Foundation convenes individual and corporate and public sector funds to support grassroots organisations in London. We're one of 47 community foundations around the country. In early September, we very quickly, in partnership with the Mayor's Office, launched the London Refugee Response. I guess actually kind of it is for LCF, it's how we can respond quickly to work in partnership to raise public funds. But actually kind of the collaboration was a really important aspect of this work, not only working with other funders in the Mayor's Office, building on the experiences that we had during COVID and also the Grenfell Tower tragedy, but actually also to work in collaboration with other funders. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's actually kind of to do it as efficiently as possible, but importantly to alleviate the onus and the demand on grassroots organisations who may be in receipt of funds that we might raise. One of the other really important principles that we set at the beginning was to work with led by and for Afghan charities. So by virtue of working together with the Mayor's Office and also with other London funders, we've created a I guess kind of a map of actually the potential organisations that we could be supporting, and actually kind of reached out to them as a collective of funders to understand actually what their needs are. And I guess kind of one of the really challenging aspects of this is it is a good challenge. Actually, what we wanted to respond to was that overwhelming desire of the London public to give, and to give substantially. And actually kind of the reason why we set up the campaign was actually kind of, as we did also see with Grenfell, that a real desire for people to give physical donations, whether that be toiletries, clothes, blankets, etc. But actually kind of getting to a point where actually what was needed more was actually kind of financial sustainment of what have been very small organisations serving a very particular community. So we are where we are. I can talk about kind of some of the where we are in some of the needs that actually kind of we're seeing coming through. But the watchword has been that we're working in partnership with other funders and also with the Mayor's office, and also to really kind of be the vehicle for that swell of public desire to kind of help on the ground.
Thank you. I'll come back to some questions about what you're doing around co-creation. Stephanie, what kind of activity is Prism doing as a donor advice fund, but also with their collective fund?
Yes, so hi, I'm Stephanie. Prism, the Gift Fund, just for you who've not heard, is a UK registered charity, and we administer the giving of individuals, collectives and groups. So as John mentioned, we operate a donor advice fund aimed at high net worth individuals. We're very flexible. For example, we have some of our high net worth individuals donate social investment to refugee causes with their donor advised funds. On the collective fund side of things, this is quite a unique model. So with this, either an individual or group fundraises from the public for a specific charitable aim. We have a lot of collective funds that have been set up with the specific aim of helping refugees, be that here in the UK or helping refugees in Greece. Just one example of our clients doing this is Refugee Trauma Initiative. They offer psychosocial support to refugee children out in Greece and their families. Now, this organisation in its nature is very grassroots, but the fact that it's set up as a collective fund at Prism, which is a UK registered charity, also gives funders and philanthropists confidence in donating to these kind of collective funds, helping to facilitate the work that they're doing on the ground, meeting the needs of refugees very on the ground in a fast way.
Do you work with local groups like Kate's group at all, or is it, what approach do you take?
I believe that some of our clients might have received funding before from Kate's organisation, London Community Foundation. I think that tends to be how we would work with people like Kate, is through funding received by our collective funds. But Prism's very much an administrator, so the programmes of our collective funds are led by our clients, and we facilitate the giving through the financial administration and the governance, and just ensuring everything is compliant.
Okay. Astrid, the title of this is The Role of Philanthropy and Social Investment in the Global Refugee Crisis, as a focus on Afghanistan. So far, we've heard a lot about philanthropy, but is there social investment? There'll be some impact investors and their advisors potentially on this call, or we'll see this tape later. Is there a role for impact ESG investors? Is there a role for social investment, or is it pretty well just philanthropy?
I think there's a role for everyone, and I mean, of course, there's so much to do, and we've gone away from just investment per se. Yes, the UNHCR. I mean, if we talk about Afghanistan, which is one of the latest emergencies on our mind, I mean, we have so much to do on the ground, but I think you can provide direct funding to help what is being done on the ground, but you can also help in so many other ways to help create that resilience and really contribute to the lives, whether it's within a country where the emergency is, whether it's, I mean, if we talk about Afghanistan, many refugees have fled and are living around the world. and they need to be helped. They need to be part of the national networks. They need to be given opportunities, employment opportunities, be able to be allowed to restart their lives. So both, I mean, I would say from a philanthropic point of view, and there's so many different ways you might be looking at it. There's of course the sustainable development goals that we have to adhere to. We should leave no one behind, and whether it's in the countries like Afghanistan, where we are now with 200 people on the ground, we're providing support, we're preparing for winter, we're helping 3.5 million internally displaced people. That's really direct help, but also there, all kinds of support is welcome. As I said, not only financial, but also through innovative projects. There's so many companies who can help in other ways than just this direct financial. But as I said, in your countries yourself, through partnerships and really working in partnership with the organizations like the UNHCR, we can do so much more. So yes, I would say there's a lot to do.
So if I'm a philanthropist and I want to support the people inside Afghanistan who are internally displaced, what can I do? And who can I go to? So if I had a lot of money and I wanted to contribute, is that through your organization or is it another way?
Of course, there are many organizations that are working on the ground, and our organization is one. It's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It's an organization that is recognized around the world. It has the mandate to work with forcibly displaced people. We have a private sector partnership section, and we have persons that philanthropists could link to, and we could walk you through every single thing we're doing right now on the ground within Afghanistan. As I mentioned, we have 200 people working there, but we work also with a large partnership of local partners on the ground. We're in 32 districts. We are helping now 3.5 million forcibly displaced within Afghanistan. But of course, there are many more people who are suffering. The winter is coming, there's food insecurity, there's COVID, there's drought, climate, all kinds of impacts. And of course, a new government that is creating also a lot of challenges for the population on the ground. So philanthropists could come to us and we could walk, of course, every single first and foremost, money that is spent will be accounted for. We have projects on the ground that are direct emergency aid, shelter, blankets, core relief items. We also provide cash to really help those people, especially those people that are now on the edge of famine in food security phase 4. So there's direct aid that can be done, but there's other ways that we help. We have innovative projects that we do, for example, with IKEA, one of the private sector companies. We have been working to develop refugee housing units, and those are stronger than tents, actually units that help people get better cover against the wind, the rain, the cold, but also the sun. So there are all kinds of ways that we can help and work through finding innovative ways of helping, but also really trying to help people to reintegrate. We have forcibly displaced, but at some point they return home. For many, many years, the past 40 years, we have been in Afghanistan, and we've helped people to reintegrate in recent years into the country, creating health and education opportunities and housing, etc., etc. So we can walk you through, but at the same time, as I said, we also work outside Afghanistan in trying to integrate refugees and make them part and parcel of the national programs, and give them opportunities to integrate.
Okay, thank you. Kate, does any of this resonate with you and your work in London?
Absolutely. The two themes that struck me were it is this balance when you're doing fundraising around emergency and sustainment. So what happens after, particularly in terms of fundraising, what happens after the first push of funds? And actually also the other point as well is around actually the reality of these organisations that we want to prioritise funding for, because they are led by and for actually kind of the communities themselves. So our balance in terms of working in collaboration with other funders is to about both share intelligence, and some of the comments that Astrid was making there in terms of the experience of people who are landing in London, a massive issue around trauma and mental health. A real challenge around, particularly around kind of women's, a desire for kind of women's officers and dedicated women's support in terms of Afghan refugees, and also around employment, and also actually kind of a real desire of actually, can we also support those other Afghanis in London who are coming forward to volunteer, and actually how do these organisations also capacity build the people who are coming forward for support. The organisations at the moment, actually kind of the understanding of actually what the numbers are actually going to be is incredibly uncertain at the moment, and actually kind of where people are landing, where they end up being settled, whether inside London or outside London. And actually kind of there are the immediate needs, and then there are the long-term needs. And I say that also in relation to both the people who are arriving and also the organisations that are trying to support them. I think there's a real fear that actually kind of, there's a point around sustainment, that actually, for example, if we are funding an Afghani women's dedicated officer to support the traumatized women who are arriving, it cannot be a short-term position. It needs to be a long-term sustained role, and actually that means long-term sustained income for these organisations. And if you look at actually these organisations in and of themselves, actually kind of they historically haven't been on the public radar in terms of donations and public activity. And so it's organisations like LCF and kind of, if we can through our own networks, raise their profile so that they can be the ones who are in control of their own destiny and where their funds are going, then that is the most appropriate thing that philanthropists can do, because these organisations know their communities and they know what's needed.
And are they, because you're part of a national network, UK Community Foundation network, are they landing in other areas with similar issues?
They are, yeah.
Outside of London, because London is very wealthy.
Absolutely, actually, kind of. So, I mean, what we're also seeing is actually how different local authorities are responding to the need based on actually kind of the intelligence that they're receiving of who's landing in those areas. So, to answer your question, yes, there are a number of other community foundations around the country who have also have Afghan refugee appeals, and kind of we're happy to facilitate kind of introductions to those. But actually it's also working in partnership with other funders in London and also with the other local authorities. We can see and know where the statutory provision is okay, and actually also kind of where additional support is needed, and actually just to make sure that the funds that we have are being put to best use in terms of where they're needed most, both now and also actually kind of in the future, kind of when the initial emergency has passed, and actually kind of we have intelligence about what the long-term need is. So, this is about us staying collectively really close to the organisations, but in an appropriate, non-demanding way as a charity, as a funder, when they are desperately trying to meet the needs on the ground as it is at the moment. And I think kind of that's the value that community foundations bring to the communities that they serve.
It's a complex issue, and I'm sorry we only have 30 minutes to talk about it, but hopefully it highlights some of the needs. So postal code lottery doesn't really apply then around the whole area of funding across the country.
Well, it's also about where refugees are being dispersed to, and I think that is the really uncertain thing at the moment, of actually kind of where people are landing, and actually where they're then settled is a constant kind of challenge in terms of actually kind of government policy and local authority policy. Probably not the best most informed person to talk about that, but actually if you want to give in your area and you're outside London, actually there will be a local community foundation in your area.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, could you talk a bit about the whole approach that Prism takes? So you talked a bit at the beginning about the collective fund and the approach, and I assume from within that there are different ways of giving. So there's philanthropy, there's social investment approaches. Can you talk a tiny bit about that, and also about the role of high net worth, ultra high net worth people? Because one of the concerns that exists is that before the pandemic, the medium gift for high net worth, ultra high net worth was about £4,000. I'm sure that's increased a bit, but it still means that the vast majority of wealthy people are giving less than £4,000 or £5,000 a year. So how are you addressing that within the DAF and dealing with this Afghanistan refugee issue?
Yeah, I'll just touch on a few points actually that Astrid mentioned about integration with refugees into their host communities, and also Kate mentioned about sort of sustainability for the programmes and the funding there. What we have seen at Prism is we've got some of our high net worth individuals that have DAFs here at Prism, and what they've actually done with their DAFs is they have offered social investment to issues addressing refugee integration here in the UK. So they're making social investment payments to organisations offering 0% interest loans to refugees to retrain in their profession. The philanthropists then receive their original investment back when the refugees are retrained in work and earning good wages, and they'll actually receive that funding back. And then these loans can then be repaid out again. So actually, in terms of sustainability of the programme, this works really well as it keeps it going, and there's a lot more. The social impact from the original donation can be huge.
There's an article in the Guardian, I think today, about Choose Love cutting back Calais funding and stuff. Is
Yes.
You guys are involved in that, aren't you, in a way?
Yeah, just to give an overview on that. So Choose Love is a collective fund operating under the auspices of Prism, and the article, I can only really give a very top line comment on it, but part of the reason for the sort of change in funding was new rules from new UK and French rules regarding immigration actually made it very hard for UK organisations to operate on the ground in northern France. So rather than cutting back funding altogether, we've just sort of changed how those operations are funding. So as opposed to having direct operations on the ground, we can now grant to charities operating over there instead.
Okay. Astrid, you talk a lot about the support you're getting inside Afghanistan and for refugees outside in different parts of the world. But you also mentioned at the very beginning prevention and stuff. Are you guys doing a lot of work with prevention, or is it more just delivering support so that people can survive, etc.?
We work on preparedness. Of course, we are part of the bigger UN family, and there are different agencies and sections within the UN, and you have the more political UN. What we are a humanitarian agency. So that doesn't mean that we're not involved with political work. Unfortunately, that's part and parcel of our daily work in the field. But basically, we are humanitarian, and we try to, first and foremost, what we try to do is to prepare ourselves and to mitigate as much as possible. If we can make sure that the situation on the ground remains calm, that there is conflict resolution before a conflict breaks out, if we can prevent help refugees or help people who might be displaced from to stay in their country, if we can allow them to return back home as quickly as possible, it's so much the better. Also, I mean, we've seen, for example, I mean, in Afghanistan, you have 2.6 million refugees that are in the neighboring countries, and we have been working before the Taliban came back on returning them back. So we're constantly working on bringing people back, finding solutions, finding long-term solutions. And if those long-term solutions are returned back home, that's fantastic. If they're not, then we try to help them integrate in the country of asylum. And in the worst case, it's maybe bringing them further from home, or they come themselves, which is in Europe, and we help them try through legal pathways, through employment, through studies, through scholarships, try to find durable solutions for them. But of course, I mean, at the end of the day, a refugee doesn't want to leave them home, and they would love to return home as best as possible. So that's the work that we're engaged in.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close to the end. Kate, I have a question about what you're doing around supporting people. So you've mentioned supporting them around basic living, supporting local organizations who are Afghani in nature. There's a whole issue that's being trying to raise, I guess, itself around power and decolonization and that whole concept. And one of the ways of dealing with that is through unrestricted funding. So are you with the Afghani organizations actually doing unrestricted funding, or is it highly restricted?
It's a combination, working in partnership with other funders who, I mean, some of the organisations that we've referenced, LCF has a relationship with them anyway, but actually in working in partnership with other funders who have lifted restrictions on their existing funds with these organisations, we will either go in and extend some of that unrestricted funding, or actually kind of if they're saying, actually it's women's, you know, for example, it's a dedicated women's officer we need for the next 3 years, actually kind of sometimes that's also what organisations want. I think the important thing for us is about listening to the organisations and them telling us what their needs are both now and in the future. And also working in, you know, matching funds that other funders have put in, so we can alleviate the reporting and the monitoring pressure on kind of the organisations themselves. They have enough to do at the moment, actually, kind of, and they need to know that they're trusted by the funding environment, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, because it is a key issue for building independence and people taking control of their own destinies in a way.
Absolutely.
Sophia has come back on, so it looks like we've run out of time. So I'm going to ask each one of you for final words of wisdom, 30 seconds. So we'll start with Astrid.
There are so many needs out there. The people that need help should not be dependent on aid. They should really be supported to be self-sufficient, whether that is back in, I mean, in this case, we've been talking about Afghanistan, or whether it's out there. And there's so much work that the philanthropy world could do there, really much more than just providing funds. It's really to make those people in need resilient again.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie. Sound.
Sorry. I think the main thing for me is just for any philanthropists that are worried about funding refugee causes because they think it might be high risk, using services like a DAF or a structure like a DAF at Prism can actually reduce this risk as the charity takes on any liability, and hopefully that would help to give philanthropists and funders peace of mind about their donations, so they can keep funding those issues, because the funding really needs to be going there.
Well, there's definitely a need for way more money, I would assume. Kate, I'm going to leave the last word to you, but can you do me a favor? I'm going to give you an extra 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Sophia's going to shoot me. But final words of wisdom, but can you give people a sense from a passion perspective what's actually happening on the street? I mean, what are some of these people really facing? Because we haven't really talked about any of this in that kind of sense. So I'll give you 30 seconds for the first, 30 seconds for the second, and then we'll see about following up with a session sometime next year.
Thank you. Listen, actually, I don't want to speak on behalf of the grassroots charities, but what we are seeing from them is, you know, the individuals running them, you know, running to stand still. They are overwhelmed themselves. I think, you know, the risk always is that the people who are running the charities, who from those communities are also traumatized themselves, which is why actually kind of long-term support is really vital. And, you know, kind of we are one platform here. There are many other platforms that you've heard from that are absolutely fantastic for a way that you can give. I would say actually kind of we you know, the immediate trauma versus actually the settlement and the challenges that come after that settlement will be a whole other ball game in terms of actually kind of how these people need support. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of actually kind of what their need is, and kind of London is so incredibly welcoming, and they have so much to offer. And actually kind of there are some amazing organizations that you could be funding to enable actually kind of those people to know that London is a peaceful and welcoming place for them to be.
I can't imagine how difficult it must be for those organizations or the people who need the services from them that are getting them from all three of you. Astrid, Stephanie, Kate, thank you very much. And I'm so sorry the 30 minutes isn't an hour, but maybe sometime next year we can look at that. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, John.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was it was amazing. Really interesting. You covered so much in 30 minutes. Thank you very much. We are close to coming to our last Walk in My Shoes of 2021. It's only around the corner, and this one is where we will be reviewing the year with a positive outlook. We're going to be exploring how we are creating the society we want to build. Also, I just want to highlight that we will be sending out a survey soon to all of our network, because we'd like to hear from you about how you want us to be bringing the events to you going forward. We're really hoping to get back to face as soon as possible. So I want to hear how keen you are for that. So thank you, everybody. We'll speak to you soon.